Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere that might sound exciting until you realize it's a waking fever dream of dehydration, open wounds, and never-ending dust. We're stepping into the real Wild West, not the version with shiny pistols and squinting cowboys, but the one with 4 a.m. outhouse runs, fleas in your boots, and the smell of 3-week-old beef tallow melting in 100-degree heat. You're not a sheriff. You're not a gunslinger. You're just you. And you probably won't make it past breakfast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and what time it is for you. Always curious where this sleepy little posse gathers from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the sound of nothing, which is exactly how the day begins here. No car horns, no phones buzzing, just the ambient creak of dry wood, the distant grunt of livestock, and the thin whistle of prairie wind curling through the cracks in your cabin wall. Your eyes sting before they even open. The air smells like someone mixed wet leather, rancid milk, and a faint splash of manure, then set it to slow roast under your bed. Congratulations, you've time-travelled to the American frontier. You lift your head, only to immediately regret it. The pillow is a folded piece of burlap stuffed with straw, and maybe some insects who've claimed it as a condo. Your mattress is lumpy, probably a reused potato sack filled with hay, and you can feel the wooden planks beneath. There's no point in fluffing it. This is luxury. You haven't even sat up yet, but your back's already trying to file a complaint. You scratch the fresh constellation of bug bites along your neck and glance at the corner of the room. Your boots sit neatly by the door, which is concerning. You don't remember placing them that way. Before you slip them on, you instinctively shake them. Good thing too, a spider the size of your palm drops out, looking equally irritated. The frontier is full of creatures that want your bed, your boots, or your blood. Now, the smell. Let's talk about it. There's a myth that the Wild West smelled like fresh pine and adventure. In reality, it reeked. Bathing was considered a biannual event. If that, water was precious, and personal hygiene didn't rank high when you had to haul every bucket by hand. You might splash your face once a week. A full bath meant heating gallons of water on the stove, pouring them into a metal tub, and hoping nobody else needed it first. And guess what? Everyone smells like this. Your cabin mates, your neighbours, even the town preacher. You're all equal in your commitment to odour outside. The livestock aren't helping. Horses, pigs, chickens, they all contribute their own symphony of stenches. Add to that a town that likely lacks any sewage system. Waste piles up behind buildings or seeps into the nearest ditch. A rainy day means ankle-deep slurry. A dry day means dust laced with particles you'd rather not think about. There's a reason cholera made regular appearances. You groan, stretch, and something in your spine makes a noise like a wooden chair giving up. You're in your 20s, but you feel like you're 83. That's the magic of frontier sleep. Your mattress is more punishment than rest. Your joints ache from yesterday's 14-hour workday, and your lungs burn from the soot of last night's fire. Because yes, if you're lucky, you had a fireplace, but fuel is scarce. You may have burned animal dung or twisted grass just to keep warm. In the summer, you bake. In the winter, you freeze. There is no thermostat, just your tolerance for frostbite. You stand slowly, 1 foot at a time, like you're testing the floorboards for traps. You probably should. Rodents chew through wood, termites burrow silently, and shoes left on the floor sometimes get claimed by passing vermin. You're not paranoid. You're adapting. The room is dim. No windows, just a ragged cloth hung over a cut in the wall. Light slants in like it's sneaking around, not wanting to see what's inside. Your furniture is a table built from mismatched planks, 2 chairs that wobble like drunkards, and a shelf nailed together with more hope than carpentry. There's a mirror, but it's not helpful. The glass is warped, more metal than reflection. You catch a glimpse of yourself, sunken eyes, dirt smudges, hair that's either windswept or alive. You smell like the past. You are the past. And it's only morning. You open the door and step out into the dust. Dust that immediately sticks to your sweat. Dust that settles in your lungs. It's everywhere. In your clothes. Your teeth, your coffee. The frontier is made of it. You could bottle it and sell it as authentic Western seasoning. Sprinkle on your beans, your dreams, your existential dread. There's a single moment of beauty, the horizon, endless, wide, alive with golden light. It's the kind of view that could trick you into thinking this life is peaceful. But you know better. You know what this land demands. You've only been awake for 7 minutes, and you already want to go back to sleep, but not in that bed. You're already sore, you're already thirsty, you've got dirt between your toes and your stomach is starting to rumble, which means it's time for breakfast. And that, as we'll discover, is not great news either. You step into the morning with low expectations and an empty stomach, a combination that feels eerily familiar to your soul, like every underwhelming breakfast meeting you've ever suffered through, but with more flies. The kitchen, or what counts as one, is just an extension of the same splinter-happy shack you woke up in. A blackened cast-iron pot hangs from a soot-streaked hook over yesterday's embers. There's no fridge humming in the corner, no bread rising in a machine, no eggs chilling behind a carton date, just the vague promise of beans, and something bitter gurgling from a dented tin pot that pretends to be coffee. Your hands go to work on muscle memory, ladling sludge into a chipped ceramic cup. You don't ask what's floating in it. Could be grounds, could be something with legs. There's no milk, unless you've got a cow outside and she's in a generous mood. There's no sugar, unless you've struck trade gold or made friends with a merchant. There are eggshells, though, crushed and swirled in, not out of culinary curiosity, but to cut the bitterness. That's right, frontier hacks. Add eggshells or salt to your coffee to mask the fact it was roasted over a brush fire and stored in a tin beside kerosene. You take a sip. It tastes like regret, with a smoky afterbite. On the table, beans. Again, stewed. Black. Maybe navy. Who knows? The variety isn't important. They've been cooking since last night. Boiled down to something between paste and gravel. Next to it, a plate of biscuits. If you can call them that, they're not the flaky, butter-laced pillows of modern brunch menus. These are hockey pucks made of lard, flour, and spiked, dense enough to knock out a raccoon if you throw hard enough, soft enough to just barely chew through if you dunk them in the coffee, which you probably will. No fruit, no vegetables, not in this season. Anyway, you can dream of an apple, maybe, if you're lucky, and it didn't rot on the way from a train 2 towns over. Tomatoes, in summer, berries, if the birds don't beat you to them. But today, it's beans and bread and boiled bitterness. Your body already knows something is missing. Vitamin C. For one, your gums feel a little too soft, a little too red. You've heard stories. Gums bleeding, teeth falling out, joints aching like you're double your age, scurvy, the sailor's disease, thriving right here in the dry, inland expanse of the American West. See? This wasn't just an oceanic affliction. Settlers, especially in winter, went months without fresh produce. They drank vinegar or pickled cabbage to keep it at bay. If they knew better, most didn't. And you just chewed a biscuit so dry it absorbed half your saliva and left your tongue flapping like laundry in the wind. Out the window, if you squint, you might spot a neighbour gnawing on the same meal. He's got a tin plate in one hand and a scar that wraps around the other. Lost a chunk of finger splitting firewood. No bandages. Just wrapped it in a strip of shirt and went back to work. He's 38. Looks 60. His eyes have that haunted glaze that only comes from 17 years of beans and people dying in their sleep from bad air or the grip. You pause and look down. Is that a weevil in your flour biscuit? Yes, it is, but you eat it anyway. That's protein. You don't have the luxury of squeamishness. Frontier wisdom. If it's moving, chew faster. Now, maybe you're wondering, surely there were better meals. Surely they didn't eat this every day. Well, technically, no. Occasionally, you might get a cut of meat. Salt pork, most often, or jerky so tough it doubles as boot leather. If someone's been hunting, you might get rabbit, squirrel, or wild bird, but that means someone had ammo, and time, and didn't miss. That kind of meal's a celebration, not a routine. Meat had to be smoked or salted to last, because there's no refrigeration. Even in winter, meat spoils fast if not handled correctly. Botulism wasn't something you heard about. It was something that killed your cousin last spring after eating sausage left too long in the cellar. He went stiff and blue, someone says later, casually, while sipping their eggshell coffee. And let's not forget the frontier's approach to seasoning. blend with a side of caution. Spices were luxuries. Pepper might exist in a pouch somewhere. Cinnamon, that's a Christmas dream. Salt was functional, not for flavor, but for survival. It cured your meat, tanned your hide, and stung your wounds. If you were fancy or urban, you might have canned goods. A tin of peaches, imported all the way from a warehouse in St. Louis. You'd open it with reverence, sip the syrup like holy nectar, and ration the slices like gold. Some towns charged what would now be $20 for a can. Historians still argue whether settlers hoarded them for holidays, or just stared longingly at the labels, dreaming of soft fruit and softer lives. And speaking of labels, those cans, not always safe. Early versions were sealed with lead solder. That's right, your sweet indulgence might also give you lead poisoning. But hey, it's better than beans. Right, you push your plate away, not because you're full, but because your jaw's tired. Your stomach growls again, confused and disappointed. The coffee kicks in, not a jolt, more like a nudge. Enough to get you moving, enough to keep you alive. Barely, you think of breakfast back home. Smoothies, omelettes, cereal in colour-coded boxes. Those feel imaginary now, like fairy tales. Here, food isn't pleasure. It's a calculation. How much effort will it take to chew this, and how long will it keep me from collapsing? Outside, someone yells about a chicken. It's escaped again. You hear boots thudding, laughter, then a gunshot. Maybe it was the chicken. Maybe not. You don't ask. You stand, wipe the crumbs from your shirt, and drink the last of the coffee. Gritty and cold at the bottom, something cracks between your teeth. You hope it's just a stray bean and not the start of a molar crumbling from nutritional neglect. You make a mental note to find someone who can pull it before it gets infected. Maybe the blacksmith. He has pliers. Breakfast, as always, ends with more questions than answers, but at least you're not dead. Not yet. You're still rubbing your jaw after that brittle biscuit when you catch a whiff of yourself again. Not much you can do about it. But today's the kind of day where you have to leave the house, which means, unfortunately, you have to get dressed. Now, to be clear, no one out here expects fashion, but function, brutal, merciless function, that's non-negotiable. And your closet, if you can even call it that, isn't here to help. It's here to punish. You open the warped wooden door to what might be a wardrobe, or might be an upright coffin someone repurposed out of necessity. Inside, your options are limited to 2 outfits. One is on you. The other is stiffer than last week's biscuit and smells like wet rope and fireplace ash. You choose the one with fewer bloodstains. Start with your shirt. Cotton, coarse, and stiff like it holds a grudge. It's not the breathable kind of cotton you're used to. This stuff feels like it was woven by someone angry at you personally. There's a mysterious stain near the armpit. Oil, soot, blood. You don't ask. The important thing is that it's dry and it doesn't bite. Yet, you pull it over your head and the seams scratch against your shoulders. It's like hugging a cactus wrapped in burlap. Already, you're sweating. Next comes the pants. Denim, but not the designer kind that comes pre-distressed and priced for heartbreak. These are stiff, raw, and probably stood up by themselves last night. There's no elasticity, no forgiveness, just thread, friction, and silent resentment. You wrestle into them like they're trying to escape. Every movement feels like a small negotiation with your dignity. You hop once, twice. Finally, you button up, just as a splinter from the fly area makes a compelling argument against further motion. You stand there panting, already halfway exhausted and not even fully dressed. And now, the socks. Wool. Scratchy. Mismatched. One's unraveling, and the other has a toe that might technically be its own separate ecosystem. But they're warm, and they keep the boots from tearing your feet into ribbons. So on they go, your boots, those special little torture chambers, are stiff from yesterday's mud. Manure, and maybe someone else's blood again. No one really investigates these things out here. You tug them on and feel the familiar pinch in your heel. If you're lucky, no new blisters today. If you're unlucky, well, you'll limp in style. If you're a woman, this ritual becomes even more entertaining. Start with the chemise. That's your base layer. A long linen undershirt, then add bloomers, then a corset. Not the fashionable kind. This is industrial-grade compression. Thick canvas laced tight until your lungs become a suggestion. Breathing is optional. Posture, however, is mandatory. You pull the laces, tug the edges, and think, "This is fine." That's the mantra of every woman on the frontier. This is fine. A tight corset in 90-degree heat while chasing 3 children and trying not to die in childbirth. Totally manageable. Once the corset is secured and you've promised to never bend at the waist again, you add a petticoat, or 2, or 3, depending on the season and how much your dignity is worth today. Then comes the dress. Long, heavy, and usually dragging through whatever the street decided to deposit this morning. Keep in mind, there's no indoor plumbing, no pads or liners, no reliable laundry service. You wear what you own until it can't be worn anymore, and then you mend it, or turn it into dish rags, or burn it for warmth. And layers, always layers. Doesn't matter if it's July and your cabin is slowly becoming a sun-baked oven. Modesty demands it. So does practicality. Layers keep dust out, bugs off, and sunburns away. If you faint from heat stroke, that's just the cost of doing business. You glance in a broken shard of mirror and notice the grime collecting at your collar, the sweat already pooling along your back. You try not to think about how this is the cleaner of your 2 shirts. The other one has been soaking in a bucket for 3 days and still smells like despair. And here's the best part. Washing clothes is a punishment disguised as a chore. You haul water, you boil it, you stir it with lye soap that burns your skin if you're careless. Then you scrub, not with gentle cycles and fragrant detergents, but with a washboard that chews up fabric like it owes you money. You wring it out with your hands, hang it to dry, and wait for the sun to do the rest. This takes hours. Hours you could have spent eating, sleeping, or figuring out why your toenail has turned black. So most people just don't. Not often. Weekly laundry is an aspiration. Monthly is realistic. If it smells less than last week, you're doing great. Historians still argue whether some settlers rotated clothing based on which item had fewer visible stains, or which one hadn't attracted insects yet. You try not to think about lice, but you scratch your scalp anyway. Even hats have their own personality. A good wide-brimmed hat is essential. Shade from the sun, a buffer from the rain, and the only privacy you'll get all day. But it's usually shared. Hand-me-downs from cousins or older siblings. Stained, bent, maybe even scorched around the edges if it got too close to the fire once. You wear it anyway. And under all this, no deodorant, no breathable fabrics, no anti-chafe creams, just your skin, your sweat, and friction. Lots and lots of friction. By the end of the day, your thighs will be negotiating a truce, and your armpits will smell like boiled leather and regret. Now you're dressed, if that's the word for it. You feel like you're walking inside a wearable oven mitt. Every movement creates heat. Every breeze carries the ghost of someone else's sweat. You're less a person now and more of a walking dust collector with buttons. You step outside. The sun finds every dark fabric and heats it instantly. Your boots already feel like cast iron pans. Somewhere under your shirt, a bug you didn't notice earlier is exploring the back of your neck. You think about slapping it. Then you think about unbuttoning your whole shirt to do so. Then you sigh and let it live there rent-free. That's the frontier compromise. Don't ask too many questions. Don't examine the stitching too closely. And above all, don't expect comfort. Your clothes are armor, punishment, and status marker all at once. If you're lucky, they survive another day. If you're luckier, so do you. And now, dressed in everything you own, sweating through history, it's time to do the one thing you were hoping to avoid. Leave the house. The second your boot crosses the threshold, you're hit with that special frontier bouquet, warm horse manure with base notes of stagnant water, livestock breath, and maybe a whisper of decomposing something. You choose not to identify the last one. There's no polite way to put it. The Wild West stinks. Not sometimes. Always. It's not a phase. It's a lifestyle. You scan the dirt-packed path in front of you, eyes trained for movement. Not because you're paranoid, but because you should be. Snakes sunbathe here. Scorpions like to nap in your laundry. And spiders the size of your hand claim squatters' rights on your porch. Everything in this place bites, stings, or slithers, and none of them care about your plans for the day. You step carefully, like a man crossing a minefield, because out here, you kind of are. The sun's not high yet, but it's already working overtime. Heat rises off the ground like something exhaling. It warps the air, melts your will, and turns every breath into a lukewarm gulp of dust and microbes. You squint down the street. Not that it's paved, of course. No, that'd be too easy. The road is dry dirt when it's not mud, and mud when it's not dust. And it never just rains. It either scorches or floods. And in both cases, the manure stays. Horses are everywhere, tied to posts, trotting past, occasionally dropping their opinions on the street without the slightest apology. There are no street sweepers, no sanitation crews. What falls stays. The best you can hope for is that it dries fast or washes away. You walk with purpose, not to get anywhere faster, but to reduce the time spent marinating in airborne particles of whatever that smell is. You pass a cluster of chickens. One of them seems suspicious. You quicken your pace. A dog lumbers by, missing a chunk of one ear. It looks at you like it knows your secrets and doesn't respect them. A child runs barefoot through a puddle that definitely isn't water. You make a mental note not to shake hands with anyone today. Further ahead, a cart is being unloaded. Sacks of grain, maybe, or flour, but not before a few rats make a break for it, leaping from the sacks like tiny acrobats. The driver barely reacts. Rats are part of the background out here. They're not pests. They're just fellow residents. You pass a row of buildings, wooden, uneven, with paint peeling like it's trying to escape. One's a general store. Another might be a barber. One's definitely a saloon. And even from here, you can hear the piano wheezing through the door like it's playing its final song. You don't dare peek inside. Not yet. Then you see it. A limp cloth hanging from a post outside the doctor's office. That's the town's version of a medical alert. It means someone inside is sick. And not the head cold, coffin soup kind. We're talking full body, life-threatening, mystery illness sick. You feel the hairs on your arms stand up. Because out here, one person's cough becomes a dozen people's funeral. You turn your head. You don't want to catch it. Not that avoiding eye contact helps, but it feels like it should. Disease doesn't need an invitation in the frontier. It shows up unannounced, settles in, and takes its sweet time leaving. And with no modern understanding of germ theory. Well, some folks are starting to get it, but most still think disease comes from bad air or moral failure. You're left at the mercy of luck, superstition, and whatever tincture the local healer mixed in a jar behind her house. Take cholera, a name whispered with fear and often followed by a pause, like people are waiting to see if it hears them. One bad water source, and half the town's bleeding from both ends by morning. Dehydration sets in fast. No IVs, no antibiotics, just old quilts, cold sweats, and hopes pinned to a bottle of peppermint oil and a prayer. Dysentery, even more democratic. You don't even need to drink the water. Just touch the wrong doorknob, breathe in the wrong direction, or eat a biscuit made by someone who didn't boil their dishcloth long enough. Within hours, cramps, fever, evacuation of everything you've ever eaten. And the outhouse, too far. Always too far. Flies swarm around you now, like they've been personally invited. They're not just annoying. They're the town's most efficient disease couriers, landing on dung, then dinner, then your face. You swat one away from your mouth and immediately feel like you need a full exorcism. There's a coughing fit down the road, wet, persistent. It echoes through the still air and sticks to the walls of your ears. You glance toward it, casually, hoping the person's far enough away to be someone else's problem. Then you remember, there is no someone else out here. If it spreads, it spreads. Historians still argue whether these epidemics were caused more by ignorance or by inevitability. After all, how do you control infection when your water comes from a stream shared with livestock? Your food is stored next to your boots, and your doctor prescribes arsenic with a straight face. You pass a woman sweeping her porch. She nods to you, then spits off the side of the step. It's red. Tobacco juice. Or maybe worse, she's barefoot, and you can see the grime caked onto her heels like tree bark. You nod back. That's the social contract here. Nod. Keep walking. Don't make any sudden promises. You reach the well and draw a bucket of water. It smells earthy, which is better than it smelling wrong. You squint at it, watching for movement. Clear is good, murky is bad. Moving is a gamble. Still, you drink it. What choice do you have? Behind you, a man is arguing with someone over a pig. You can't quite make out the words, but the tone escalates fast, shouting. Then a sudden silence. You wait. Nothing happens. Not this time. But you've seen what happens when tempers tip, and with everyone armed, well, it doesn't take much for a routine day to end with someone face down in the road. Bleeding into the dust, violence is always an option in the Wild West. It's not loud and dramatic. It's quiet, sudden, and usually petty. An insult, a look, a lost poker hand. You learn to walk softly and let others win. You toss the last sip of water to the side. You'll boil the next batch. Hopefully, as you make your way back toward the cabin, you step around another pile of manure and try not to think about the way your throat itches. Probably dust. Probably. You tell yourself that as you glance, once more, at the limp cloth hanging outside the doctor's door, just dust. Just tired. Just another beautiful, bacteria-soaked morning in paradise. You haven't even made it halfway down the street before the feeling creeps in. That particular flavour of unease that lets you know you're being watched. Not in a warm, neighbourly way. Not even in a mildly curious, who's the new guy way. This is the kind of watching that assesses your waistline for a holster, your eyes for weakness, your boots for value. It's not personal. It's just habit. Everyone out here watches everyone else, because survival depends on it. You walk like someone who belongs, not fast enough to look nervous, not slow enough to look lazy, just the right frontier shuffle. Dust kicking, posture straight, hand close to your side kind of stride. You nod to a man leaning against a post. He nods back. Brief, measured, just enough to say, "We're not enemies." Yet, every man you pass is armed. It's as standard as socks. More so, considering most can't afford clean socks but wouldn't dream of going unarmed. Pistols on hips, rifles over shoulders, knives tucked in boots. Even the local preacher carries a small revolver, nestled somewhere beneath his holy robes. Out here, God may forgive, but he doesn't provide cover fire. Still, despite all the weaponry, don't expect some theatrical standoff in the middle of the street. No dramatic clock striking noon. No wind whistling past two men squinting through cigar smoke. Hollywood got that part wrong. The truth, most frontier violence wasn't grand. It was stupid. It happened in back alleys, or over card tables, or when someone drank too much and insulted the wrong brother-in-law. The idea of a clean duel was laughable. Why give your opponent a fair shot when you can just shoot them in the back? Historians still argue whether any true high noon-style gunfights ever happened at all. The gunfighter image was a post-frontier invention, massaged by pulp novels and travelling Wild West shows. What was far more common was an overheated room, a sour dispute, a flash of steel, and a body left in the dust while everyone else got real quiet for a while. You turn down the main drag of town. It's not much. A few storefronts, a couple of dogs, a half-built church, and the smell of waste fermenting in the sun. The street is a mix of packed dirt and last week's horse leavings. Your boots crunch on something unidentifiable. You don't look down. To your left, a barber's pole spins lazily, chipped paint flaking off. Inside, a man getting a shave with a straight razor in one hand and a Colt, .45 resting within arm's reach. Trust isn't exactly a renewable resource around here. To your right, the general store buzzes with flies and conversation. Crates of overpriced supplies stacked out front. Nails, flour, rope. Behind the counter, a bearded man counts coins with one hand and adjusts his shotgun with the other. Not for show. Theft isn't theoretical here. It's a statistical inevitability. Past the store, a couple of boys wrestle in the dirt. Their laughter cuts through the tension for a moment, pure and unaffected, until one of them pulls out a slingshot and nails the other in the side of the head. The hit boy wails, the other runs, and a nearby adult doesn't even glance up. Just another Tuesday, and then you reach the saloon, a structure held together by sheer personality and whiskey fumes. Swinging doors, maybe, if the hinges haven't rusted off. Most are just open frames now, doors long gone or kicked off. Inside, it's dim, one oil lamp flickering, a piano in the corner with 3 good keys left. The bartender looks like he hasn't slept since Lincoln died. Behind him, rows of unlabeled bottles, most of which might contain liquor. Some might contain furniture polish. You hear a glass shatter. No one flinches. A man at the bar has a bandage wrapped around his thigh. A bullet wound, by the look of it. He's sipping something thick and brown through gritted teeth, like the alcohol might teach his leg a lesson. Across the room, a card game is underway. Tension dances between the players like static. No one speaks above a whisper. One man's eye keeps twitching. Another's hand lingers a little too long near his belt. You don't go in. Not yet. You're not drunk enough to feel safe in there. Instead, you walk further, past the undertaker's office, which, incidentally, is the busiest business in town. The sign above the door reads, in beautifully hand-lettered irony, eventually, everyone stops in. It's funny until it's not. Down a narrow alley, you spot the local jail. It's more symbolic than effective. A single cell, one deputy, and a lock you could probably open with a firm stare. The sheriff is probably out, riding the perimeter, or sleeping off last night's community mediation. In truth, most law enforcement here is part-time and improvisational. If someone shoots someone else, the sheriff might investigate, or he might just shrug, ask who started it, and go back to his coffee. That is, assuming there is a sheriff. Many towns relied on vigilante justice or community decisions. These often involved ropes, trees, and a very loose interpretation of guilt. If you're lucky, they just run you out of town. If you're unlucky, they don't. You glance around at the people walking past. Hard faces, sunburned skin. Most of them aren't old, but they wear their years like they've been carrying them uphill. You realize something chilling. Out here, every stranger is a potential threat, but also, potentially, your only source of help if things go sideways. It's a strange paradox. Complete distrust and desperate interdependence. You have to count on people you wouldn't loan your boots to. A woman walks by with a rifle slung across her back and a toddler balanced on her hip. She doesn't look at you. She doesn't have to. The rifle does the talking. And that's the thing. Guns aren't about bravado here. They're tools. Like hammers. Like shovels. They dig holes, one way or another. You don't draw unless you're ready to kill. And you don't kill unless you're ready to spend the next few weeks looking over your shoulder for a cousin, a friend, or a business partner with revenge on their mind. Because the frontier has no real justice system. It has memory and grudges. The sun climbs higher, the shadows shrink. You feel the sweat soaking into your shirt and the steel tension coiled under every social interaction. This town isn't lawless, but the law here is more of a suggestion than a guarantee. It depends on who you are, who you know, and whether your bullets hit first. And now, armed or not, you've walked the street, passed the looks, avoided the fights, and survived the first rule of any Wild West town. Don't start anything you can't finish. But be warned, sometimes you don't have to start trouble. Sometimes it finds you anyway. You keep walking past the sheriff's office and the saloon, past the horses sweating in the heat, and the flies staging revolts in every sunlit corner of town, until you come to the building you were trying very hard to ignore, the doctor's office. From the outside, it looks more or less like every other structure on this street. Wooden walls that groan in the wind, a crooked porch that dares you to step on it, and a front door that might fall off if you sneeze near it. But the real giveaway is the sign, a hand-painted plank that reads Surgery and Remedies, flanked by a faded red cross and a set of ominous-looking forceps that seem to scream, "Abandon hope. All molars ye who enter here." Inside, the smell hits first. Not antiseptic, not clean, more like old sweat, boiled bandages, and something vaguely medicinal that might have once been herbs, or possibly something pickled in alcohol. It's unclear. A man sits slumped in a chair by the window, clutching his side. He's got a blood-soaked rag pressed under his ribs, and the glassy eyes of someone who's just realized he's made a terrible mistake. By surviving long enough to end up here, the doctor appears from a back room, wiping his hands on what was once a white cloth, but now looks like it's been used to stain furniture. He's not wearing gloves, or a mask. His coat is frayed and his spectacles are perched at a confusing angle, as if even they've given up. He nods at you with a professional lack of enthusiasm. "What's wrong?" He grunts. "That's the intake process. You'd better have a short answer, because bedside manner doesn't exist here, mostly because the concept of clean beds is already pushing things. Let's say it's a tooth. You've got one aching like it's plotting against you, abscessed, swollen, radiating pain up through your jaw and into your eye socket. Modern, you would be in a reclining chair with numbing gel, local anesthesia, and gentle conversation about your last vacation. Frontier you're about to be handed a bottle of whiskey and told to bite down on a leather strap. The doctor rummages through a wooden box that might have doubled as a fishing tackle kit, and pulls out a tool that looks more appropriate for blacksmithing. The forceps are rusted at the hinge. He doesn't clean them. He doesn't even pretend to. And then, He yanks. No countdown, no warning, just pain, white and sudden, like lightning behind your eyes. Your vision blurs, your ears ring, and if you're lucky, the tooth comes out clean. If you're not, he goes back in. There's blood. There's more whiskey. Maybe you scream. Maybe you faint. Maybe you just dissociate so hard that you forget your own name. That's between you and your pain tolerance. Surgery, you ask. Oh, you sweet optimist. Here's how surgery works on the frontier. Someone holds you down. The doctor makes a cut, and you try very hard not to die of shock before the infection does the rest. Anesthesia, if offered, is either a bottle of whiskey, a rag soaked in chloroform if you're very lucky, or a firm grip and a prayer. There are no sterilized rooms, no surgical gloves. Instruments are wiped on whatever's handy. Your shirt, his sleeve, a nearby curtain. Maybe they get rinsed in the same basin used to wash hands. Boots, and yesterday's instruments. The concept of germs is just starting to circulate, thanks in part to a few brilliant minds overseas, but out here, it's still considered an opinion. One of many, like whether or not you should sleep with your boots on to avoid scorpions. Some doctors have heard of Louis Pasteur. Fewer believe him. Many consider his ideas unnecessary. Or worse, French. You don't want to hear the word French in any frontier medical sentence unless it involves toast. So what do they believe in? Well, bloodletting is still popular. You've got a fever. Time to drain some vitality out of you. Leeches. Only if you're fancy. Most just open a vein and hope you feel less terrible afterward. Mercury is another favourite. They love that shiny, toxic metal. It's used for constipation, syphilis, sore throats. You name it. You're given a dose and told to expect some side effects. Side effects like madness and death. Opium, too, is generously applied, sold as laudanum, basically alcohol and opium with a dash of Victorian optimism. It dulls pain and reality simultaneously. Widely available, hugely addictive. Given to men, women, and even children. You've got a cough. Try heroin. That's not a joke. That's a label. Then there's arsenic. Yes, arsenic. Prescribed for skin conditions. Ulcers. And even as a general pick-me-up. You may not be cured, but you'll be dead before you have time to complain. You notice a shelf lined with glass jars filled with floating mysteries. Maybe gallstones. Maybe experimental tonics. One of them looks suspiciously like a lizard. Another has something green and bubbling that might have been a plant. Or someone's lung. You shiver. Women, in particular, get the shortest end of this very jagged stick. Childbirth is like playing Russian roulette, except the revolver has 5 loaded chambers. There's no prenatal care, no ultrasounds, just hope, crossed fingers, and whoever happens to be nearby when labour starts. If you're lucky, a midwife with some experience and a calm hand. If you're unlucky, the doctor with whiskey breath and a knife he used earlier to cut bacon. Mortality rates are staggering. In some places, 1 in 4 women die in childbirth. That's not hyperbole. That's just numbers. Hemorrhage, infection, prolonged labour. There are no interventions, no C-sections, no sterile tools, just screaming, sweating, and praying it ends before one or both lives do. Dentistry, you already know the answer. Pull it or live with it. There is no other menu option. No fillings, no root canals, no braces. You lose teeth young, often from infection. By middle age, you're gummy and grateful to still have a jaw. Broken bones. Set them with splints made from whatever wood's lying around. No x-rays. If it's a clean break, you might recover with a limp. If it's compound, where bone pokes through the skin, they may amputate, and may is generous. Many just let it rot, which brings us to amputation, the crown jewel of frontier medicine. You think tooth pulling is bad? Try losing a leg with nothing but a saw and a belt between your teeth. No anesthesia, no morphine, unless you're lucky and someone shares their stash. The saw isn't clean. It's barely sharp. The operation is fast and brutal and loud. And then comes the part most people don't survive. The aftermath. Infection. Gangrene. Blood poisoning. Tetanus. There are no antibiotics. Just hope. And whiskey. Lots of whiskey. You step out of the doctor's office feeling unsettled. The man in the chair is still breathing. But you're not sure if that's good news. You glance down at your own hands. No cuts. No bites. No strange rashes. And you silently vow to keep it that way. Out here, Getting injured is worse than bad luck. It's a potential death sentence, with a waiting room. By now, the sun's climbing past its peak, and your stomach, somehow both cautious and desperate, reminds you it's time to eat again, or at least try. You consider skipping it, but that would require energy, and energy requires food, so you accept your fate and start toward what passes for a restaurant. Calling it that might be generous. It's more like someone's oversized kitchen, or a dining room that started as a living room and never fully committed. The windows are open, because ventilation is the only defense against the smell of salted meat sweating in a pot that's been boiling since dawn. You enter, and the air hits you, a strange combination of old onions, dry beans, and something metallic that your nose identifies as either overcooked liver or undercooked justice. The chairs are mismatched, the tables are sticky, and the flies are already circling like they've reserved their own seat. You take a place near the wall, where it's slightly less humid. A waitress, not unfriendly, just profoundly tired, slides you a tin plate. No menu, no choices, just lunch. It consists of something greyish and vaguely meat-shaped, a side of boiled potatoes that have surrendered all texture, and a biscuit so hard it might double as a doorstop. No garnish, no apology. The meat could be pork, could be beef, could be something else entirely. It's been salted within an inch of its life. That's how it was preserved. No refrigeration. Remember, just salt, smoke, and blind optimism. You take a bite. It's chewy, sour, and leaves a film on your teeth like you've just licked the inside of a cannon. You chew slowly and look around. Every other table is doing the same. Chewing, swallowing, not asking questions. That's lunch etiquette on the frontier. Eat quickly. Complain privately. There's conversation. Though, there's always conversation. One man at the next table is recounting a story about a stagecoach robbery. Says it happened 3 towns over. Claims he knew the guy who did it. A loner. Fast with a rifle. Bad with his temper. Another leans in and swears he heard it was the Black River Gang again. A third says no. No. It was a pair of kids from Nebraska. Teenage twins. One with a limp. The other with a fake name. You don't interrupt. These stories aren't for verifying. They're for seasoning the meal. Every town's got its own version. Sometimes they're true. Often they're not. But they always end the same way. A shootout. A hanging. Or someone vanishing into the canyons with a sack of silver and a bloodied saddlebag. Frontier justice isn't concerned with details. You try a bite of potato. It collapses under the fork like a political promise. The flavour is earnest, bland, but sincere. It tries. Then the talk at the next table shifts. "Did you hear about Red Sam?" one of the older men asks, lowering his voice just enough to make everyone else lean in. "Got caught stealing a horse outside of Dry Gulch." The others grimace, not because they feel sorry for Sam, but because they know what comes next. Strung up by a cottonwood before sundown, the man continues, tearing a chunk off his biscuit. Didn't even ask questions. You swallow hard. Whether or not Sam actually stole that horse is a detail lost to history. On the frontier, theft of livestock, especially horses, was considered just shy of murder. Maybe worse. A man without his horse was as good as dead. And so, the punishment was swift, public, brutal. Trials, if they happened, were short affairs. If enough people said you did it, you did it. No lawyers, no appeals, just a rope, a tree, and a crowd with nothing better to do. Historians still argue whether these lynchings were a grim necessity or a failure of civilization. Probably both. Law enforcement was thin, one sheriff for hundreds of miles, if that, and communities often felt justice was theirs to deliver. Mob justice filled the vacuum. Sometimes it got the right man, sometimes it didn't, and sometimes it didn't care. You think of the story you heard earlier, the man with the bandage in the doctor's chair. Was that a fight over a poker game, a mistaken identity, or just the wrong glance at the wrong time? Because out here, survival depends not just on skill, but on not standing out. Don't speak too loudly. Don't question the popular version of events. Don't be new. And above all, don't get accused. Because accusation is half a conviction. You finish the last of the biscuit. Your jaw aches again. You can feel the food settling like a challenge to your digestive tract. And in the back of your mind, there's that lingering worry. Was that meat cooked all the way through? There's no health inspector here. No standard temperature chart in the back kitchen. Just a pot, a fire, and someone's best guess. Dysentery, food poisoning, parasites. These are not uncommon guests at the frontier table. If you're lucky, it passes quickly. If you're not, well, maybe you'll be Red Sam's neighbour. The waitress swings by again and refills your tin cup. It's water. You hope. There's a floaty thing. You pretend it's a seed. Across the room, a man starts coughing. Deep, wet, rattling. No one moves. No one even reacts. That's what fear looks like when it's been normalised. Quiet and resigned. You stand and nod politely to no one in particular. That's the frontier way of saying I've survived lunch. For now, outside, the sun hits you like an open oven. The street's brighter, but not cleaner. A dog licks something off a wagon wheel. Two men argue about the price of a saddle, their hands hovering near their belts, and a boy runs past, barefoot, waving a stick and laughing like nothing in the world could touch him. You envy him, but not for long. You glance at the town's message board. Really just a plank nailed to the saloon wall. A few handwritten notices, one offering a reward for a stolen mule, another warning about counterfeit silver coins. And then, in larger script, wanted, dead or alive. You recognize the sketch. Barely. It's vague. Could be anyone. Could be you, if you squint. You step back instinctively, because out here, wanted posters aren't just decoration. They're invitations. And sometimes, all it takes is one person pointing a finger and a few others nodding along. Doesn't matter what really happened. If you can't prove your innocence faster than they can find a rope, you're done. Justice here isn't blind. It just squints, shrugs, and moves on. You walk away from the restaurant with your gut full and your nerves frayed. One bad meal, one bad look, one bad rumour. That's all it takes. And while the food might kill you slowly, the people, they tend to move quicker. You step past the last building in town and onto the open trail. The great wide nothingness that stretches toward whatever settlement, fort, or imagined prosperity lies beyond the horizon. Travel in the Wild West was never a leisure activity. It wasn't about seeing new places or finding yourself. It was about hauling your entire life across hundreds, sometimes thousands, of unforgiving miles and praying the wheels held up longer than your optimism. And it always begins the same way. A wagon, not the sturdy, gleaming kind you've seen in paintings with white canvas bows fluttering in a gentle breeze. No, what you've got is a wooden rattletrap held together with rusted nails, rope, and a prayer muttered in a language you've long since forgotten. The axles are cracked. The wheels creak like a haunted attic. The canvas top is torn from that time you underestimated a tree branch. Again, you take the reins. If you're lucky enough to have a team of oxen or mules, horses are faster but delicate. Oxen, slower, stubborn, but less likely to drop dead after the first heat wave, assuming you can afford any animals at all. And off you go. The road, if you can even call it that, is not so much a road as a memory. A few wheel ruts in the dirt, some dried manure, maybe a broken barrel or a child's shoe to remind you others came this way, and not all of them finished. The first thing that hits you is the dust, not just a nuisance, a full-body experience. It billows up with every turn of the wheel, coats your tongue, your eyes, your clothes. It seeps into your lungs until your cough sounds like sandpaper being folded in half. By midday, you're breathing through a wet rag tied around your face like a bandit. If you're lucky enough to have one, you bump along at a soul-eroding pace, 3 miles per hour on a good day. Less if the wind's against you. The jostling is relentless. The wooden bench beneath you offers all the cushioning of a church pew, and after an hour your spine begins negotiating its own divorce. Your bladder complains, your knees ache, and your backside goes numb. Now and then, the wagon hits a rock, and the whole thing jolts like it's trying to eject you. You clutch the frame and hope the wheel survives. Because if it breaks, and they do, often you'll be crawling in the dirt trying to fix it, and fix might just mean jamming a branch into place and hoping it lasts until the next creak. Some travellers carry spare wheels, others carry spare hope. Neither lasts long. Around midday, you stop to water the animals. They're foaming at the mouth, eyes rolling. One looks like it might keel over. You know the signs, heat stroke. But there's no vet, no cool barn, just a warm bucket and a harsh truth. If the mule dies, you walk, you rest in the shade. If there is any, and eat something portable. Dried beef, hardtack, the same food you had yesterday, and the day before, it's dry, it's bland, it tastes like resignation. Then someone mentions the river ahead. You all go quiet, because rivers, out here, don't play fair. There are no bridges, no warning signs, no safe crossing posts with Instagrammable views, just water, and whether or not it kills you depends entirely on luck, timing, and how well your wagon floats. Spoiler, it doesn't. You reach the bank by late afternoon, the Platte, or maybe the Snake, or the Columbia. It doesn't matter. The name changes, but the risk stays the same. You stare at the churning current and do the math. How deep is it? How fast is it moving? Are there rocks underneath? Did someone else cross here recently? How many bodies floated downstream last season? There might be a ford, or a shallow spot, or someone might know of a ferry, but the ferryman charges a small fortune per wagon, and you, like most, have already spent your last coin on salted pork and axle grease. So you prepare to cross the old-fashioned way. You remove the canvas cover, lighten the load, waterproof the wagon as best you can, which is to say, not very well. The wheels creak ominously. The river gurgles like it knows something you don't. And then you go. The water climbs faster than you thought it would. First the wheels, then the floorboards. It sloshes in around your ankles. The wagon rocks. One wheel catches a rock and jolts the entire frame sideways. Your heart spikes. The animals panic. They rear. One breaks free. A child screams. Someone drops a barrel of supplies overboard, and it spins away like a toy in a bathtub. The back of the wagon dips. The current grabs it. And then you're in fully, completely, floating like a coffin in slow motion. You lean, shout, tug at the reins. The current is stronger than all of you. The animals flail. The wagon tilts. A moment later, it tips entirely. Water floods the inside. Crates scatter. Clothes vanish. Your food, gone. Your blankets, gone. A cast iron pot hits you in the shin and draws blood. You go under. And when you resurface, coughing and gasping, you're clinging to what used to be your wagon tongue. Half your belongings are downstream. Someone's screaming. Someone else is praying. This is a normal river crossing. Deaths are common. Children drown. Oxen slip and are swept away. Wagons flip and crush whoever's inside. You've seen the crosses along the trails. Simple wood markers. Names carved in haste. Some just say Mother, or Little Joe, or nothing at all. Historians estimate that 1 in 10 people who took the Oregon Trail didn't make it. That's 40,000 people. Some rivers are nicknamed after what they take. The Green River, the Sweetwater, the Graveyard Mile. These names aren't poetic. They're warnings. You drag yourself back to shore. Wet, cold, miserable. Your boots squish. Your blanket smells like algae and failure. Someone is sobbing. Someone else is already repacking. Because there's no stopping. You can't afford it. Winter is coming. The mountains don't wait. If you don't cross them before the snows fall, you'll die. Plain and simple. So you wring out your shirt. You nail the broken axle. You tie what remains of your possessions with rope and desperation. And you walk forward. Because there is no going back. No one talks about the glamour now. The romance of the open road. The dream of fertile land and opportunity. The wagons roll forward in silence. Each wheel groaning like it knows what you're headed toward. You don't want to think about what's next. But your body already knows. Tomorrow, your blisters will open. Your rations will spoil. Your child will get a fever. Your water will taste like iron. And the next river will be just as wide, just as cold, just as unforgiving. And still, you'll cross. Because that's what people do out here. They move forward. 1 mile, 1 prayer, 1 broken wheel at a time. You leave the wagon trail behind, dragging your sore body toward the promise you thought would save you. Gold, silver, ore of any kind. Really, anything shiny enough to convince your aching hands it was all worth it. Mining towns dot the frontier like misplaced ambition. Carson City, Deadwood, Leadville, each with its own legend of the man who struck it rich with 1 swing of a pickaxe and never worked again. You heard the stories. You believed the flyers. You arrived with calloused hope and a few dollars to your name. But what you got wasn't wealth. You got a shovel and lungs full of dust. The entrance to the mine is a gaping black mouth in the side of a hill. reinforced by a few sagging wooden beams that scream temporary solution. You step inside, ducking your head instinctively. The air changes immediately, cooler but heavy, thick with dampness, and something else you can't quite name. Not rot, not mold, more like the scent of deep time, rock, sweat, and old dynamite. The tunnel is lit by oil lamps, spaced too far apart. Shadows rule here. The deeper you go, the more the light gives up. You move slowly, watching your footing. The floor is wet in places, slick with a film of slurry and grease. Wood planks keep your boots just above the puddles. Most of the time, your breath echoes off the stone, each inhale bringing a taste of something metallic. You cough. Again. You've been coughing for days, weeks. Maybe it started as a tickle. Now it's a constant rasp. Everyone has it. They call it miner's cough like it's a quaint regional habit. What they don't tell you is that it's the early warning sign of something far worse. Silicosis, a lung disease caused by inhaling too much fine rock dust. Every breath is a gamble. You pass another man hunched over, chipping away at the wall with a pickaxe. His shirt is soaked with sweat. Even in the chill, his face is smeared with grime. He doesn't look up, doesn't have time to. There are quotas to meet, even for those working for themselves. There's an invisible clock ticking in the back of every mind. Sunlight, oxygen, and luck, all running out. You reach your station, deeper in today. You're chipping at a narrow seam that someone swears has gold in it. Maybe, more likely, it's iron pyrite. Fool's gold. A glittery reminder of how easily the earth tricks men into wasting their lives. You swing your pick. The vibration shudders up your arms. Chips of stone scatter across your boots. You keep swinging, over and over, hour after hour. No music, no talking, just the rhythmic sound of men breaking the earth and the earth, in turn, slowly breaking them. It's dark, it's loud, it's dangerous. And then there's the dynamite. When picks can't do the job fast enough, it's time for blasting. You stop, wipe your brow, and step aside for the powder crew. They arrive with sticks of dynamite tucked under their arms like firewood, and faces that say I get paid too little for this. They drill a hole into the rock face, slowly, loudly, then stuff in the explosives. You help pack the charge, your fingers trembling just a little too much. They insert a fuse, light it, and everyone turns and runs. The explosion is less a bang than a thunderclap wrapped in panic. The air punches you in the chest. Rocks fly. Dust clouds rise like smoke. Somewhere nearby, someone curses, then coughs, then goes quiet. You wait for the all clear before returning to the site, now partially collapsed and waiting to be cleared by hand. You glance up at the ceiling, eyeing the support beams. Some are cracked, some aren't even present. You ask if they're safe. The supervisor shrugs. Safe enough, he says, which is code for, we won't stop you. Cave-ins are part of the job, so are gas leaks, deadly ones. Carbon monoxide is odorless and silent. Sometimes men just slump over, never to stand again. Some carry canaries in cages. If the bird dies, you leave. If you don't have a canary, you hope your buddy's face turns grey before yours does. In this job, survival is often a matter of who breathes last. You stop for lunch, if you can call it that. Dry bread, maybe a strip of jerky. Your hands are too dirty to hold food, but you eat anyway. There's no place to wash, no clean bench to sit on, no break room with coffee and a microwave. You sit on a bucket, chew slowly, and try not to cough too hard. The man next to you rubs his hands raw with a rag and mumbles about a friend who lost his arm last week. Blasting too close to the cut, he says. Didn't wait long enough. He doesn't seem sad, just tired. That's the thing. Everyone here has seen someone die, some up close, some from a distance. No one flinches anymore. After lunch, it's mercury time. If you're gold mining, especially in placer operations, mercury is your best friend and worst enemy. It binds to gold particles in the sediment, forming an amalgam you can extract. That's the theory. In practice, it means hours of sloshing mercury through pans with your bare hands, inhaling the vapors, letting the toxins seep into your skin. You feel dizzy, numb, a little confused, but that's normal, right? Until it's not. Mercury poisoning creeps. First, tremors, then memory loss, mood swings, teeth falling out. They call it Mad Hatter's disease in the eastern cities, where hat makers suffered the same fate out here. No one bothers naming it. You just start shaking, or laughing for no reason, or wandering off and never coming back. Your profits are slim. Miners don't get rich. The men who sell shovels and whiskey do. And the ones who run the assay offices, buying your ore for pennies on the dollar. They weigh it, test it, frown, and say, "Not very pure." You argue, they shrug, and then they offer you a drink as compensation. Meanwhile, the mine owner, who lives 3 towns over, makes real money. You see him once a month. Maybe he arrives in a buggy, smiles like a banker, and leaves with a pouch full of dust and promises. You stay behind. By evening, your muscles are gelatin. Your hands shake from the constant vibration. Your ears are still ringing. Your fingernails are black from the grit. You stagger out of the mine and into the light, blinking like a mole. The sun feels like a betrayal. Someone coughs behind you, deep and ragged. You know that sound. You hear it in your sleep. The mining camp is worse at night. The air smells like whiskey and fire. Drunken arguments flare into brawls. Knives flash. Someone fires a pistol into the air. Someone else doesn't come back to their tent. And in the distance, you hear singing, off-key, desperate. Men trying to remember what hope felt like. You collapse onto your cot, a canvas sling strung between 2 wooden posts. You stare at the ceiling, thinking about all the gold you didn't find today, and how little you'd be paid for it anyway. Your hands throb. Your teeth ache. Your lungs feel like gravel sacks. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again, because out here, in the glittering shadows of the American dream, you don't mine gold. Gold mines you. So, you tried mining. You tried not dying in a river. You tried walking across blistered plains with a wagon that hated you. So now, naturally, you decide to become a cowboy. After all, the stories made it sound noble, romantic, even wide open skies, freedom on horseback, sunsets and solitude. Maybe a harmonica, maybe a loyal dog, maybe you, silhouetted against the horizon, becoming one with the land. That version doesn't mention the blisters, or the beans, or the part where you're sleeping in the dirt while 1,000 head of cattle snore beside you. Just one ill-timed thunderclap away from becoming a stampede. Still, you sign on. The pay's not great, $30 a month, if you're lucky, but room and board are included. By room, they mean the ground. By board, they mean beans. Let's start there. Beans for breakfast, beans for lunch, beans for dinner, sometimes salt pork, sometimes biscuits, sometimes coffee strong enough to wake your ancestors, but mostly beans, cooked in a battered pot slung over a campfire, stirred with the same spoon used to dig out horseshoes and fend off snakes. You eat them in a tin bowl that was probably used as a wash basin the day before. You don't complain. No one does. It's bad luck. They say cowboys rarely get scurvy because the beans keep them going. What they don't say is that after 2 weeks, your internal organs start composing protest songs. Your day starts before dawn. Always. The cook clangs a pan. Someone curses. The fire's already crackling. You blink against the darkness, slide out of your bedroll, and step into your boots, still damp from yesterday's river crossing and faintly buzzing from whatever crawled in overnight. You shake them once. Nothing comes out. That's the best you can hope for. You saddle your horse, who looks about as thrilled as you are. Horses are the backbone of cattle driving. They're also moody, skittish, prone to stepping on your foot without apology, and expensive to replace. You ride one until it's too tired, then switch to another. A good drive carries a remuda, a string of spare horses you rotate like socks. If you're lucky, if not, you ride the same one every day until you both develop matching limps. Once the herd's moving, the real work begins. A cattle drive isn't a parade. It's a long, dusty, often miserable procession of up to 3. 0 animals with the collective attention span of toddlers and the physical strength of battering rams. Long horns, mostly. Big, stubborn, and built like horned locomotives. They move slow when you want them fast, and bolt the second someone sneezes too loud. You ride along the edge, flanking they call it, keeping the stragglers in line. You shout, you whistle, you wave your hat. Sometimes, if one starts to wander, you race ahead and circle back to guide it. Other times, you just curse and follow it for a mile before it gets bored and rejoins the herd on its own. You eat dust all day. not figuratively, literally. It billows off the herd in thick clouds, coating your teeth, your skin, and the insides of your ears. You spit brown. You blow your nose and it looks like you've been working in a coal mine. Your bandana, tied across your face, helps for about an hour. Then it becomes just another dust-soaked accessory. The sun blazes above you like a personal insult. No shade, no breeze, just the long, flat horizon, broken by the occasional tree or carcass. You don't think about time. There's no point, just distance, forward, one hoof after another. You stop for a noon meal, more beans. The cook, a man affectionately known as Cookie, serves you from the back of a chuck wagon that's been rattling along the whole way. He doesn't smile. He doesn't have to. The food speaks for itself. You find a patch of grass, sit cross-legged, and eat. Your back cracks. Your legs tingle. You forget what your own bed feels like. Someone plays a harmonica. It's out of tune. It doesn't matter. Then it's back in the saddle. You ride until dusk, until the cattle finally slow, until even the bulls stop pretending to be brave. You help corral them into a rough circle, a living wall of bone and horns. They grunt. They snort. They eye you like they remember how you treated them that morning. Night comes without warning. The cook builds a fire. You eat. Yes, beans. Again, you stretch your legs, nurse your saddle sores, and try to remember what clean skin feels like. You pull your bedroll near the edge of the herd, not for comfort. There is none, but to be close enough in case something spooks them. Coyotes, lightning, a loud snore from the rookie cowboy who still thinks this is adventure. One loud noise, and 3. Super row head of cattle can turn into a wall of panic in under 30 seconds. Stampedes are real, and they're not romantic. They're deafening, disorienting, and deadly. When a stampede starts, the ground trembles like it's about to split. You wake to a sound like thunder, hooves pounding, horns scraping, men yelling. You leap onto your horse in the dark, half asleep, adrenaline screaming through your veins, and ride alongside the herd, not to outrun it, but to turn it, slowly, carefully, in wide circles. The goal is to spiral the herd until they tire. If they run straight, they'll keep going for miles, straight into trees, into rivers, into each other. And you, if you're not careful, you whistle, you yell, you wave your hat like a madman. Eventually, they slow, and if no one got trampled, that's a win. You return to camp, shaking. Someone pours you a tin of coffee. It tastes like old regret. You drink it anyway. Back to the bedroll, back to the stars. Brilliant, cold, and uncaring. They stretch across the sky in a way you've never seen before. That's one of the few gifts out here. The sky, the silence, the reminder that you're a speck on a speck. Eating beans and sleeping beside a 1,000-pound animal that might kill you accidentally in the night. You close your eyes, but sleep doesn't come easy. Your legs twitch from the ride. Your hands ache from gripping reins. Your ears stay tuned for snorts, hoofbeats, or the creak of a saddle. Because tomorrow, you'll do it all again. And the day after, and the one after that, until you reach the next rail town, until the herd is sold, until the boss says you can head back the way you came, or sign on for another drive. Because that's the thing. Cowboying isn't glamorous. It's a job. It's a gauntlet. It's a life of constant motion, constant vigilance, and constant chafing. You're not a hero. You're not a legend. You're just a man on a horse, trying to get cattle from point A to point B without dying, starving, or being kicked into next week by a longhorn with no concept of personal space. And you'll keep doing it, because you're good at it. And because, out here, being good at something, even something as unforgiving as this, is better than being nobody at all. You leave the cattle drive behind, blisters, dust, and longhorn side-eye included, and try your hand at the one thing everyone says is honest work, farming. They say it like it's noble, like it's the backbone of civilization, like tilling the soil and feeding the nation makes you a better man. It doesn't. It just makes you tired. Farming on the frontier isn't a gentle hobby. It's not baskets of vegetables and fresh bread cooling in the window. It's a gamble you play with the sky, and the house almost always wins. But land is cheap. Thanks to the Homestead Act of 1862, the government offers you 160 acres if you can just live on and improve it for 5 years. That sounds doable. until you realize that most of what you're handed is either dust, rocks, or grass so dense it once gave cavalry horses anxiety. You arrive on your little square of paradise, look around, and realize there's no house, no barn, no fence, no well, no road, just grass. Grass that stretches forever in every direction. It looks calm, gentle, beautiful. Even then you try to plough it. The sod isn't dirt. It's a dense, tangled mat of roots that has held the prairie together for centuries. Ploughing it is like trying to cut leather with a spoon. You hitch up your mule, or if you're poor and cursed, yourself, and drag a broken iron plough across it inch by inch. The blade skips, catches, breaks. You curse. You sweat. You wonder what the hell you've gotten yourself into. The wind picks up. It always does. It never stops here. It slaps your face with dirt, lifts your hat, whispers in your ear like it knows something you don't. You build your first house out of the very stuff you're trying to conquer, sod. You slice it into thick, brick-like chunks and stack them like loaves of bread. The result is what's affectionately called a soddy, a low, lumpy structure that's as damp inside as a root cellar and smells faintly like earthworms. When it rains, the walls weep. When it's dry, the roof sheds chunks of dirt onto your blanket like a passive-aggressive roommate. Spiders live in the ceiling. Snakes sometimes visit through the floor. Mice are permanent tenants. You try not to think about it. You sleep anyway, because by the end of the day, you're too tired to care. The soil you manage to plough, eventually, is grudging at best. You plant wheat, or corn, or whatever seed you manage to trade for. Then you wait for rain. Rain is everything. Rain is life, except when it isn't, because sometimes it doesn't come at all. Your little seedlings crack and wither under the sun, and the ground turns hard as iron. You try to water them by hand, haul bucket after bucket from a well that mocks you with its dryness. It's never enough. Other times, the rain comes all at once, biblical, sheets of water pounding your field into soup, flooding your rows, washing your hard-earned topsoil into the neighbour's pasture. Lightning hits a tree and sets the prairie on fire. Your horse bolts. You dive into the sodium prey. And then, when the weather isn't trying to kill you, the insects take their turn. You see them first on the horizon, a faint shimmer, a ripple in the sky, then the sound. Dry, raspy, like paper being torn endlessly. Grasshoppers, thousands, millions. They descend in waves, consuming everything green in their path. Cornstalks, wheat heads, garden leaves, curtains, tool handles. You saw one eat a saddle strap once. They crawl on your clothes, on your face, inside your shirt. You slap and scream, but they keep coming. The sky goes dark. You light fires, bang pans, scream into the void. Nothing helps. In one afternoon, they erase a year's labour, and then, insultingly, they move on. You gather what little remains, dry-eyed and numb. You won't eat your own crops this year, again, so you go into town and try to sell something else. Eggs, butter, the extracts you didn't want to part with, but the general store pays pennies, and everything you need, flour, sugar, coffee, is twice what you can afford, so you buy less. You stretch the beans, you boil water and pretend it's broth. Meanwhile, your body is changing, your hands have blisters under calluses, your nails are cracked, your back protests every movement. Your legs ache from walking field to cabin and back again. All day, every day, you haven't had a day off in months. You miss teeth, you miss salt, you miss your reflection, and the work never ends. Fix the fence, dig the well deeper, patch the roof, shoo the raccoons out of the pantry, chase the pigs back from the neighbour's plot, shovel out the latrine, start the fire, milk the cow, mend your shirt, feed the chickens, pray one doesn't just fall over dead. Sometimes they do that, and just when you think the land might forgive you, might reward you for your suffering, something else comes. A freak frost, in June, kills the young crop. A tornado rips off your roof. A drought turns the soil to dust. Again, historians still argue whether the average homesteader was naive, brave, or just desperate. Probably all three, because out here, hope is a form of madness. And you need a little madness to keep planting seeds in a field that just spat out your last harvest like it was offended. You think of quitting. But where would you go? The mining town chewed you up. The cattle drive left your ribs bruised. The city's too far, and even if you make it, you'd have nothing to show for your time except debt and skin like sun-baked leather. So you stay, you plant again, not because you believe it'll work, but because the routine is all you have. The rhythm of seasons, of sowing and waiting, of hoping and failing, and sometimes, just sometimes, you get a good year, the rain comes gently, the sun doesn't scorch, the grasshoppers go somewhere else, your corn stands tall, the wheat ripens golden, you harvest it with shaking hands and tears you didn't expect, you sell a few sacks, you buy sugar, maybe even boots, you allow yourself to believe until next spring, when the sky changes again, and the land reminds you, kindly or cruelly, that it owes you nothing. The days out here are long, but the nights are longer, not because you're awake by choice, but because sleep just doesn't come like it used to, not with the wind screaming through your walls, not with the creaks of a structure made from dirt and hope, and not with the persistent feeling that the prairie itself is watching you. You lie in your sod house, on a cot made of rope and dry grass, and stare at the ceiling. It's low, earth-packed, alive. Spiders thread their webs between cracks. Beetles scurry across beams. Once, you swear you heard a snake moving just beneath the floor. You lay there frozen, hand inches from the knife under your pillow, not blinking. Eventually, the sound stopped. You never found the snake. Your breathing is shallow, like you're afraid to make too much noise and be noticed by something. Anything. Outside. Because outside is pure silence. Not the kind of silence that comforts you after a long day, but the kind that feels loaded, dense, haunted. You miss noise, not the shriek of the wind or the buzz of flies, but people, voices, music, the idle sounds of strangers walking past a window, a neighbour's laugh, even the clatter of distant hooves. Your nearest neighbour lives 4 miles away. You haven't seen them in weeks. You used to wave when passing each other on the trail, used to trade coffee for flour, or stories for news. Now, you don't remember the last time you even said their name out loud, not because you forgot it, but because talking, these days, is mostly a one-person activity. You speak to yourself, sometimes softly, sometimes not. At first, it was just to fill the silence, a muttered thought here, a whispered idea there. Then, longer monologues, full conversations, imagined arguments with people who aren't around. You win some of them, you lose others. One night, you catch yourself laughing at a joke you didn't tell. That's when it starts to scare you. Out here, no one calls it depression. No one talks about mental health. They call it prairie madness, sometimes sodhouse madness. But it isn't madness that arrives all at once like a storm. It's slow, patient. It creeps in like dust through a cracked window, imperceptible at first, then everywhere. You can't remember what day it is. You lose track of meals. Your diary, once a diligent daily record, now has entire weeks missing. The last entry reads, "The wind hasn't stopped for 4 days. Neither have the noises in the walls." You wrote it 2 weeks ago. Your appetite shifts. Some days, you eat too much, as if to fill the silence with chewing. Other days, food feels like an intrusion. You forget to eat. Then you forget you forgot. Your sleep is fitful, thin as gauze. You lie down early, but rest never follows. The mind won't stop. It plays everything on repeat. Every mistake, every worry, every hypothetical outcome you have no power to control. You stare at the roof. You stare at the door. You stare into the dark corners of the room like they're judging you. And when you do finally sleep, the dreams come not vivid, just loud. Voices, whispers, places you haven't been in years, faces you're not sure are real. You wake up sweating, unsure if you screamed aloud. Once, you find your boots moved across the floor. You're alone, at least. You think you are. Historians still argue whether prairie madness was purely psychological, born from loneliness and labour, or partly environmental. Some believe it was a cocktail of factors: isolation, sleep deprivation, poor nutrition, and the low-grade poison of lead cookware or contaminated well water. Others say it was grief manifesting in a land that demanded too much and gave back too little. Whatever it was, it broke people. You hear about the woman 2 counties over who burned down her own sod house while her children slept inside, or the man who walked 20 miles to town and shot the blacksmith without a word, or the young boy who locked himself in the barn and refused to come out for 3 days. They weren't evil. They were tired. Like you are now, you sit on the edge of your bed, elbows on knees, and stare at your own hands. They're cracked, dirty. You can't remember the last time your nails were clean. Your muscles twitch without your permission. Your jaw hurts from grinding in your sleep. You consider walking to town just to see someone, but it's 20 miles. Your horse is limping. The weather looks threatening. So you stay. You read the same page in your Bible 3 times before realizing you don't remember a word of it. You try to hum a song. It dies in your throat. You try to write a letter. You get as far as dear before stopping. There's no one to write to, or maybe there is. Maybe you just don't know how to start. Out here, time doesn't pass in minutes or hours. It passes in seasons. You wait for the snow to melt, then for the ground to thaw, then for the corn to rise, then for the rain to stop, then for the wind to die down, then for the frost to leave again. But there's always something next, something looming. You're always waiting to live, and in the meantime, you forget how. Some families crack under the pressure. The wife packs the children and leaves, walking barefoot to the train depot. The husband drinks what little remains in the cellar and doesn't wake up. The youngest child begins talking to imaginary friends with very specific names. You see the signs in others, but no one talks about it. There's no word for it yet. No doctor. No treatment. Just whispers. She's got the madness, they say, as if it's contagious, as if it's not just the soul doing its best to survive. You close your eyes and lie back down. You count the cracks in the ceiling. You imagine someone, somewhere, counting the same cracks. You breathe, slowly. The wind moans outside. The walls don't answer. You wonder if tomorrow will feel any different. It won't, but you let yourself believe it might. Because if you don't, the silence wins. You've been living under the illusion that the law, even out here, is something you can rely on. That if something goes wrong, if someone steals your horse, or burns your barn, or points a gun at your chest, you can ride into town, find the sheriff, and justice will be served. That illusion doesn't last long, because law in the Wild West isn't about justice. It's about geography and timing. And who knows who? There is a sheriff, technically. His name's painted on a wooden sign nailed to a door that only opens on Tuesdays. If he's sober, his jurisdiction, roughly 4,000 square miles of hills, ravines, creeks, scrubland, and sins committed too far from any witness willing to talk. You ride an hour to his office, then another, then another. By the time you get there, if you're lucky, he's in. If you're really lucky, he listens, and if the stars align, he might even do something about it. But most times, he just leans back in his chair, spits in a rusty can, and says, "Well, you got any proof?" Of course you don't. You had a neighbour, now he's gone. So is your fence. So is your mule. You tried to track the prints, but the wind erased them, and the rain came hard last night. The sheriff nods like he's heard it all before, because he has, and usually there's not much he can or wants to do about it. He's not a detective. He's not a marshal. He's a man with a tin star, a loaded gun, and too much land to cover. His priority isn't solving crimes. It's keeping a lid on things just enough that no one burns the town down before the next cattle drive arrives. And if he does decide to act, he won't go alone. He'll deputize whoever's handy. Shopkeepers, drunks, maybe you. Congratulations. You're now part of the law. Don't get too excited. There's no training, no badges, just a revolver, a vague sense of direction, and the hope you're riding after the right man. That is, if there even is a man, because often it's just suspicion, and suspicion, out here, travels faster than horses and lasts longer than facts. That's where the vigilantes come in. When the sheriff is slow or uninterested, people take justice into their own hands. Sometimes that means a neighborhood posse. Sometimes it means a mob. They don't always wear masks. They don't always wait for darkness. They show up on porches, with rope in one hand and a story in the other. Maybe you stole a cow. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you looked at someone's daughter too long, or refused to sell your land, or just said something too clever in the wrong saloon. And suddenly, you're guilty, not because of what you did, but because of who's willing to say you did it. You remember Red Sam. Everyone does. They said he rustled horses. No one proved it. They didn't have to. A group of 12 men rode out, dragged him from his bed, and by dawn he was hanging from a cottonwood just outside of town. No trial, no priest, no goodbye, just boots swinging in the wind. Historians still argue whether frontier justice kept the peace or just replaced one kind of lawlessness with another. Some towns formed committees, vigilance groups. They called them, sounds official, civilized. But those groups had no checks, no rules, just rage, memory, and often whiskey. And when men drink enough, they stop looking for justice. They start looking for revenge, or distraction, or a reason to make an example of someone. You've seen it happen. A man accused of cheating at cards, tied up before the dealer could blink, a shopkeeper blamed for watering down whiskey, beaten senseless behind his own store, a stranger who didn't say where he was from, shot before he could finish explaining. Sometimes the sheriff steps in, sometimes he doesn't, sometimes he can't, because sheriffs walk a narrow line, too soft, and people ignore him, too strict, and they turn on him, so he picks his battles. Looks the other way when the saloon owner pistol whips a ranch hand, steps in only when there's enough daylight and support to be seen as upholding the law, not inventing it. And then there are the marshals, federal agents with bigger titles and broader powers. They come through on occasion, chasing counterfeiters, stagecoach robbers, train thieves, but they're rare. They cover whole territories, and they're more interested in headlines than homesteads. Don't expect them to help when your neighbor's fence creeps 6 feet onto your land. Land disputes, by the way, practically a competitive sport. No clear records, no universal maps, just word of mouth and poorly drawn boundaries. You say the creek runs east, he says it runs south. He builds a fence anyway. You knock it down. He shows up with friends. You grab your rifle. Congratulations. You're now in a land war. The courts, if your town has one, won't help. The judge lives 2 counties over and arrives once every few months to sort out the biggest fires. The rest of the time, disputes are settled with threats, bribes, or bullets. You'd like to believe in the law, that it stands above all this, that it's fair. But the law, out here, wears a face, and that face changes depending on whose cattle are grazing where, who plays poker with the deputy, and who's known in town as a good man, even if he beats his wife and pockets the church donations. You see a man arrested for theft. 3 days later, he's back, charges dropped. You see a woman try to file a complaint against her husband. The sheriff laughs. You see a black cowboy, one of the best hands you've ever met, run out of town after someone accused him of looking too proud. He never came back. Justice doesn't live here. Reputation does. Skin color does. Who owes who a favor does. And if you get on the wrong side of those invisible lines, the consequences are fast and final. So you learn to keep your head down, to settle small disputes quietly, to ask questions sideways, to never be too right, or too loud, or too fast on the draw unless you're ready to finish the job. Because if the sheriff doesn't get you, and he might not, the vigilantes will, and if they don't, your own friends might. Out here, a posse isn't just something you join. Sometimes, it's something that turns on you, especially when there's a body, and someone needs to blame. So you ride into town, buy your supplies, nod at the deputy, smile at the man who might have stolen your tools last fall. You tip your hat. You laugh at jokes. You let others win at cards. You pay your debts early, and when you leave, you ride fast. Not because you're guilty, but because innocence, out here, isn't a defense. It's a liability. You've seen the men work, swinging pickaxes, roping cattle, riding trails that blur into the horizon. You've seen them spit dust and bleed from their knuckles and call it a day's labour. But if you want to understand the backbone of the frontier, the real, unspoken infrastructure holding every meal, every homestead, every living body together, you'll need to follow a woman from dawn to dusk. You'll have to keep up, though, and you won't, because women on the frontier don't stop. They don't pause. They don't wait for recognition or reward. They just do, because if they don't, no one else will. You wake beside her, and before your second blink, she's already out of bed. No time for yawning or easing into the day. She's building the fire, hauling water, and kneading yesterday's leftover flour into something edible. The coffee's already boiling, not because she had time, but because she made time. The baby cries. She rocks it with her foot while scraping ash from the stove. Breakfast is ready by the time you manage to stand, but she's not sitting down. She doesn't sit much. After the dishes, she heads outside. Chickens need feeding. The cow needs milking. One of the pigs has found a way through the fence again, and it's now up to her to fix it. Not because she's the most qualified, but because the man of the house is in town, or working the fields, or recovering from the fever that almost killed him last week, which, ironically, she nursed him through, between boiling linens and praying he wouldn't take the baby with him. Then there's the laundry, not the kind you know, the soft hum of a machine, the scent of detergent. No, this is scrubbing shirts against a washboard until her knuckles split. It's hauling buckets of water heated over a fire that's never quite hot enough, wringing everything by hand, hanging heavy cloth on lines that sag under the weight of everyone's dirt and sweat. And while the clothes dry, she sews, mends the hem of your trousers, patches the elbows of your coat, rebuttons every shirt without complaint. Her hands never stop moving, not because she enjoys it, but because there's no alternative. If she doesn't do it, it won't get done, and if it doesn't get done, someone suffers, probably her. She checks the root cellar. Potatoes are holding up. The carrots are soft. The apples are gone. She'll make do. She always does. The family's been eating variations of the same meal for 3 weeks now. Beans, salt pork, maybe a biscuit if there's flour. The kids complain. She smiles and serves them anyway. Then she picks up the shotgun. Not for show. Coyotes have been circling the henhouse. Or maybe it's a cougar this time. Doesn't matter. If something comes too close to the children or the livestock, she'll shoot first and mourn later. She's done it before. This isn't an anomaly. This is her life. Women on the frontier weren't just helping. They weren't the assistants. They were full partners in survival, whether anyone acknowledged it or not. They harvested crops. They hunted small game. They built furniture. They delivered babies, sometimes their own, sometimes the neighbours', and when childbirth went wrong, which it often did, they didn't scream, they clenched their teeth, bled through their dresses, and either lived or didn't. Childbirth was a gamble. No hospitals, no pain relief, no guarantees. A woman might go into labour in the middle of a storm, 2 miles from the nearest help. If she was lucky, she had a midwife. If she wasn't, she had a husband whose medical experience started and ended with pulling a tooth last fall using pliers and alcohol. You hear stories. The woman who gave birth standing in a field, then kept working. The girl of 17 who buried her baby behind the barn and never spoke of it again. The mother of 8 who died in the 9th attempt, because her body finally said enough. Historians still argue whether these women were tough or simply trapped. Maybe both, but toughness doesn't mean invincible. And it certainly didn't come with freedom. Legally, most married women couldn't own land in their own name, couldn't vote, couldn't sue, couldn't divorce without scandal. And if they did, they risked losing custody of their children, their home, and any scrap of security they'd managed to cobble together. And if the husband drank too much, hit too hard, left without warning, there was no safety net. She just carried on, unless, of course, she chose something else. Because for some frontier women, the brothel wasn't the fall, it was the escape. It wasn't glamorous. Don't get that idea. But for certain women, widows, runaways, single mothers, girls whose families vanished on the trail, sex work was the only profession that offered income, food, and shelter without pretending it came with love. The madams who ran these places were often former soiled doves themselves. They wore lace when they could afford it, kept books better than most men, and understood business in a way that made bankers nervous. They knew how to navigate drunk cowboys, sheriff bribes, and the unspoken rule. Men could visit, but women couldn't talk about it. Most prostitutes didn't live long. Disease was rampant. Gonorrhea, syphilis, infections from rough men and rougher conditions. Abortions, when available, were backroom affairs done in haste and silence. Addictions took many, laudanum, morphine, whiskey laced with who knows what. Violence took the rest. But for a brief window of time, a woman might earn more in a week than a married farm wife made in 6 months. She might save. She might even leave, open a dress shop, run a boarding house, reinvent herself. Most didn't. Even the ones who escaped carried the scars. The respectable women whispered about them. The men pretended not to recognize them. The children never asked. But deep down, everyone knew. Without these women, cooks, Mothers, labourers, midwives, and yes, even prostitutes. This whole frontier would collapse faster than a sod roof in a rainstorm. They were the reason the children didn't starve. They were the reason homes stood. They were the reason injured men recovered, shirts stayed stitched, and the dead got buried with dignity. They were the reason you are still breathing, still standing, still pretending this life is something you chose, and they never asked for thanks. They didn't have the luxury. They had work to do. You look at the woman next to you now, her hands blistered, her face tanned and lined before 40, her eyes sharp from too many losses, and you realise she's tougher than any outlaw, she's braver than any cowboy, and she'll still be standing long after you collapse into your boots, because she has no choice. The sun lowers, and the land glows with a strange, almost holy light that happens just before darkness settles in. You'd think it was peaceful, still, warm, orange gold spilling across the hills like it was sent by heaven itself. But peace isn't what you feel. What you feel is a peculiar tightness in your chest, a kind of whispered fatigue that goes deeper than muscle or bone. It's the recognition, in the fading light, of everything this place has taken from you. And the truth is this: the Wild West was never wild because of bandits or shootouts or duels at high noon. It was wild because you were always almost dead. Every hour, every day, not just from bullets, but from infection, from starvation, from childbirth, from wind, from isolation, from a world that did not care if you survived it. You don't get to romanticize it now, not after what you've seen, not after what you've endured, and yet, as the sky purples and the wind finally calms, you understand why people stayed, why they endured, because in that final hour before nightfall, the land doesn't punish you, it pauses, and in the pause, you feel something close to reverence. The air cools, the cattle fall quiet, the chickens roost, the sky, unbothered by city glow or electric haze, explodes with stars, each one sharp, infinite, and untouched. You lean against the doorway of your cabin, sod, wood, patchwork, and for once, it doesn't feel like a coffin. It feels like shelter, barely, but still, dinner is sparse. A few scraps, leftover beans, maybe a piece of bread with more air than dough. The fire crackles. You boil water, not for tea, but for heat. You rub your feet. You peel off your socks and study the blisters like they're some kind of map, a record of suffering, of progress. Your body is sore in places you didn't know could ache. Your knees pop. Your back pinches. Your fingers are so dry they catch on the blanket as you pull it over your lap. But still, you're here. You made it through another day, and that, out here, is a victory. You open the door one last time before sleep, just to listen, to make sure nothing's coming for your chickens, or your family, or you. There's no sound but the creak of branches, the murmur of crickets, and the occasional whimper of something small in the distance. A fox, a coyote. You don't care. If it stays out there, it can keep its secrets. You stare up. The stars are wild. Not just beautiful, wild, raw. They don't shine politely like the ones in the city. They burn. They announce themselves. And for a brief moment, you feel connected to the land, to the past, to every soul who ever stood in this same silence, wondering if they'd live to see another morning. You remember what the preacher said last Sunday, during that brief, dusty sermon no one really listened to. God made man in his image, then left him here to prove it. You chuckled at the time. Now it doesn't seem so funny, because out here, if you don't prove it, every day, the land will erase you like a bad pencil sketch. No announcement, no obituary, just dust. You take one last breath of clean, unsanitized air. It smells of sweat and soil and something deeply ancient. You close the door and wedge the chair beneath the handle. Not because it'll stop anything, but because it gives you permission to rest. You crawl into your blanket and feel every joint complain. And as your eyes close, you finally understand what people mean when they say hard-earned sleep. Not metaphor, not a figure of speech. Literal. You earned this, every second of it, with pain and dirt and choices you never meant to make. You sleep with one ear open, because out here, even in dreams, you have to be ready. Ready to defend, to rise, to adapt, because the West doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't care if you're scared. It doesn't care if you've done everything right. It'll test you anyway. Again and again and again. Not with cruelty, but with complete indifference. The sun sets. The darkness moves in. Not ominous, just vast. You drift off. Not with peace, but with the dull comfort of exhaustion. You made it through a day in the Wild West. And that's enough. Tomorrow will ask everything of you again. But not yet. Now, in the stillness of a world untouched by electricity, by alerts, by clocks ticking down meetings, you sleep, and the land waits, quiet, unbothered. Wild! Your breathing slows. The fire has dimmed to a soft red glow, barely visible through the cracks in your cabin wall. Outside, the night stretches wide and unknowable. There are no passing cars, no voices echoing from streets, just the rustle of grass, the creak of wood, the timeless hush of land unspoiled by concrete. Your body, worn, spent, aching, finally lets go. No alarms tomorrow, no expectations, only light, hunger, and the sky to measure your hours. You shift under the blanket, the familiar weight of fatigue wrapping around you like a second skin. You remember everything you survived today, the dust, the heat, the quiet, the noise that lives inside quiet. You earned this stillness, and maybe, just maybe, that's what the Wild West was always about. Not the gold, not the legends, but this moment, where you stop running long enough to hear the wind change. The same stars you saw when you stepped outside earlier now drift above your roof, undimmed. They've been shining over this land for centuries, long before wagons or fences or outlaws. They'll keep shining long after. You're part of that now, even if only for a night. So let your muscles sink, let your breath stretch, let the silence carry you. You've done enough for one day, and the land, harsh as it is, agrees. Good night.